Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I am a senior designer, world designer here on Lord of the Rings, and I go by scenario on the message boards. And we're here today to kick off the first landscape previews of the Kingdoms of Harad expansion pack. So please let me know if you can hear me. Otherwise, we can get going on this. For those of you that are unfamiliar with these streams, I jump into the world, run around on the landscape, and talk about what goes into making the world of Lord of the Rings Online. For the next several weeks, we are going to be doing weekly preview streams of all of the regions that we're introducing with the Kingdoms of Harad, starting this week with the region of Adagím. If you're new to this stream, welcome aboard. Please remember that this is a world and level design focused stream. So as we're running through these regions, and just in any other streams that I've done before, we're only talking about the world design, the level design for these spaces. We're not talking about things like systems, content, lag, and the fixes associated with those things. This is purely about world design. I'm not the right person to ask the questions outside of world design. Your best bet, if you have questions on those things, is to check in on the message boards, check in on our Friday streams with Cordovan, and to drop into Discord too. We've got a lot of engagement from our team there as well. So anyways, without further ado, welcome to the borderlands of Adagím. This is the first of the regions that players will kind of be sent to through the progression flow and the content flow of the expansion pack. And it connects to the region of Imhular, which you might be familiar with from the Corsairs of Umbar expansion pack, or sorry, Legacy of Morgoth expansion pack. You can see here, I'm going to turn around real quick, and we are taking a look at, Imhular here. Those of you that have played through this region may be very familiar with this vista. And now the impassables in the mountains here in the southeast corner of Imhular are open for players to proceed into the region of Adagím. Adagím is kind of the continuation of the forests of Imhular. While Imhular is blighted and dying for its own reasons, Adagím has, I want to say, held off against that blight for as long as it can, and something new has occurred in this region that has put it at risk. So we are now in Adagím, the Molder Wood. You'll note here it says now entering TBD Western Foothills. This is an in development stream. I forgot to put the little in development notes on there. So you're likely to see things that look like bugs, things that aren't complete yet as we go through this region. But here we are in the Molder Wood. One of the things that you'll see here is it is more foresty than Imhular was. This is a region that the Kinta, the elves of this region, have called home for a very long time, and you can see part of why Adagím is in trouble is we've got the fungus is growing here, and part of the story in this region is about what's going on, why is this fungal blight coming through, and what can the elves of the Kinta of Adagím do to kind of push back and fight against that fungus. In addition to the threats of the fungus, there are also your expected enemies here. Orcs reside throughout this region, and there is a minor presence of Ordak along the borders of it as well. But by and large, this is a very more natural region in comparison to, well, I guess all the regions are natural regions, but this is more of a wild region, I guess I would say, something more akin to the forests that we've explored in before, but with just enough creepiness in it to make you feel uncomfortable as you're roaming around. The region is, and I will bring up the map real quick. So here we have Imhular. This is the map of Imhular here. And it's hard to see because the logo for the expansion pack is kind of covering it up. But in the lower left-hand corner, or lower right-hand corner here, kind of where the Zahumak map node is. If you head due east from here, you will enter into Adagím, and we have the region of Adagím here. You can see we've got 4 hubs spread throughout the region. You can see them here, 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 and here. That will take you through the content. And the concept behind Adagím is, you have kind of these higher hills and valleys in the east and west, and the lowlands in the central areas that have become flooded and have become the kind of starting point for the blight. And the blight is working its way, creeping its way up into these higher hills. So when you're up in the higher hills of this region, things kind of look a little bit normal. Some of the trees still look, a little dying, decaying. It is not as lush and verdant a forest as we've seen elsewhere in the game. And in these upper hills, you will find pockets of the blight creeping through here and there, poking through, showing up as you just turn a corner when you're not expecting it. When you get down further into the valley, which is where we'll head after I'm done up in this area, you'll start seeing it more and more blighted, to the point too where even the water has, this gross scuzziness, gross fungal invasion floating on top of it. This was actually a fun region for me, in large part because the regions I've been working on over the last couple of years have often required a lot of kind of heavy detail work in them. You don't think things like, canyon valleys and whatnot would need a lot of detail work, but they do. And the thing that was nice about working in Adagím is I didn't have to put as much of the kind of like detail painting work in here that I was doing in other places to make it look good, because you have more space filling assets in the scene files to help bring it to life. Working in Urashtar, I couldn't rely on frills and bushes as much to build the space, show off the space. I had to, really use terrain painting to show off, the details on the landscape. Whereas in something like a forest, you can rely very heavily on things like the bushes, the scrub, the frills, the trees to, populate a scene and make a scene feel good without needing to do that super high detail texture work. All right, so Mr. Alexman asks, why Harad has so much green? I was expecting to see vast deserts of sand and sandstorms. So there are a couple of different portions of Harad, right? Where we are in Shagana, right here. We're in this section here, which is considered near Harad. Jarmat, down here in Far Harad, that's where you really start seeing the big endless tracts of sand deserts. It's still fairly arid throughout large portions of this. I think honestly, portions of Amberol, which are enjoying the kind of coastal Cape weather, and here in Adagím are kind of the greenest spaces that we're going to have in the expansion pack. So I wouldn't say there's been a lot of green in our exploration of Harad, but we are trying to kind of be aware of where climate and whatnot might have something like this present. There are also jungles present in Harad itself. Not like this, but what you would think of when you think of jungles proper. Thick, dense, canopied forests, almost like the old forest, but with more hanging mosses and vines and whatnot. Those sorts of things do exist in Middle Earth and exist in Harad, kind of more on the western edges of near Harad, south of Umbar. But it is not all deserts and ruin, though it is a lot of deserts and ruin. So Thandrum asks, I recall you mentioning working on a forest zone, assuming you also worked on Ansharu. Does working on two regions that don't connect feel different to working on two adjacent zones as you did last year with Amberol and Urashtar? So I would say Amberol and Urashtar are only connected in the vaguest sense that there is a pass through from between them. It's not really like you are crossing into one region into another directly through there with like kind of broader crossability. So I very much looked at building Urashtar as, you know, how does it relate to and connect to Imhular than it does to Amarul. In what we're doing for the expansion hack here, and we'll have a preview of Ansharu down the road as well. You know, I think that the big difference that there is just it's a different kind of design challenge. It's a different kind of headspace that you're working in when you're building these things, and you know, it's actually building Adagím, because we were waiting on assets to build out this region, but I was able to start working on Ansharu much earlier. And so it was actually kind of a relief to be building a region like this that's a little bit more simple when it comes to a world design compared to Ansharu, which was a lot more detail painting and whatnot. So yeah, from a development perspective, it's just nice to have a break, have regions like these that are a break every so often. Mr. Alex says, why do you keep adding huge frills after you said in previous streams that you're going to tone them down? So I think in conversations in those previous streams, we're often talking about some of these bushes here. As far as like some of these goes, you know, we could certainly take into consideration and bringing down their size a little bit. But I think in previous context, what I was talking about was more the like density and size of the bushes more so than anything. Here there are bushes present, but they are not as dense as they are in other regions, and thus because of that they're not as problematic. Before I wander on, I do want to stop in here just real quick to talk about Livarth. This is a Kinta stronghold, or village, I guess, is the best it could be called. You know, the Kinta are not usually ones for many I want to say permanent structures in their way of life. However, when you start coming into Adagím, Adagím is kind of their homeland as far as we're concerned, as far as developing them as characters. And so things are a little bit more permanent here than they might have felt in other areas. You know, we've got these more reminiscent, honestly, of Lothlorien style structures than we had in places like Shonith and Vartulin. So it is kind of showing that, you know, while they do roam Harad, they roam this territory and are often kind of a little nomadic, they also do have places that they can come back to that are home for them. Blossomberry asks, don't know if you know this, but will there be new reputation factions to earn? Yes, there will be. I don't know the specific details about those factions outside of doing some work to help support the landscape gathering of certain collectible items for those reputation factions. But I'm sure there will be more conversation about those as you know, we get into Bullroar previews for the expansion pack. All right. Carlo Kuhn says, is it planned to add new variety of models for the opponents? For example, Huorns look like first models from the beginning, and the dragon models showed in the trailer, also old ones. So we have a lot of new monster artwork here. You know, we can't always add new monster artwork for everything, but certainly there are new variants for different monster types throughout the expansion pack. You know, we've seen we wandered by the new kind of snarly looking wood troll a little bit ago. We'll see if we can find another one to get a closer look at him. I know we have a couple different versions of him, including this fella up here who, oh, the poor guy, he is just all sorts of covered with blobby fungus. You know, and then we also have, while this is not new, it is a, you know, not commonly used version of the Hjorn. I think we have some versions that are kind of, I don't know if it's using this one or the more standard Hjorn, but there are definitely going to be Hjorns that are, you know, representative of this region. You know, over here we have our poor happy little guy, Boglurker, who is also covered in fungus. So, you know, we in this region anyways, we wanted to lean into the theme. There are some new fungal spiders, which we're seeing right here. Some good old cordyceps for you. Isn't that lovely? Our sun spiders are very, very unhappy at the moment. So let's see. I saw a question here right after that. So yes, Potino Bowen asks if this is an elf area. Kind of love this. So yeah, we were just in Livearth, which was one of the Kinta hubs. All of the hubs in this region are based around the Kinta. There may be other peoples who have come to this region to look at and help support them, but by and large, the Kinta are the, you know, primary peoples of this region. One of the fun things we did here is we've got this nice, gross, scuzzy water that has, you know, a good infection going on top of it. That you don't want to go swimming in this. It's a good thing that I am cloaked right now. Thangdrum says, the gloomy Lothlorien I was kind of hoping for. That was our plan with this. You know, we wanted to channel vibes of things like Lothlorien, the Old Forest, and Fangorn, but put a twist on it. And certainly with some of these trees, they are very twisty. So we wanted to make sure that we kind of brought that out in this region. Carissa says, the Kinta do controlled burns. So there is a story purpose and reason for those burns happening when the content of the region is available to test and play. That'll kind of be your first opportunity to learn what that is all about. Riri Freak says, did any of the dungeons from the visual update poll like Silverteam get updated? Haven't been in these parts for a while, just wondered. Yes, we did do a couple of updates back at the beginning of the year for some of those. You know, the Silverteam, the Scary Quarry, and I thought there was a third one. I don't remember off the top of my head. Basically, each world designer took an old space and rehabbed it. For the expansion pack, we haven't done any of that. You know, we're focused purely on building this. All right. Druidsfire says, this stream suddenly needs an arachnophobia mode. There are several spider camps throughout this region. And they're not happy fungal spiders, so it makes it even worse and scarier. But we got our glow bugs. Yay, glow bugs! Epic Games says maybe we will even We will even get some new fire pits for Lindleby housing, as Cord did say last stream to ask me. So there is technically a fire pit coming with and it's a smaller sized fire pit coming with the housing items being released with the expansion pack. I don't remember exactly where it is going to be available from, but there is a fire pit coming. It is not big. It's a smaller, more like fire sized fire pit. So hopefully that scratches some of that itch. But I understand the want for something a little bit more like intricate and composed. All right, well, we're coming up on another one of our major POIs in this area. You could see it looming in the distance there behind the other trees. This is the mother tree of Adagím, and she is in a sorry state. She is not happy at all about what's going on here. All right. Thangrim says, really transition from normalish woods to more fungal infested woods. That was one of the fun things to work on and to build on in this region, was that kind of transition. How do we, and a lot of it was painting down the scene files and letting the scene files randomly decide where fungus was going to happen, where it wasn't going to happen, adding in a little bit of extra here and there where it makes sense, and then painting the terrain to go along with it. And then we have just wonderful, awful grossness. Thanks to all of that. The Forest Gospel says, I hope some of these trees can be yard deco. I will have a gift. I will have to gift one to Malefic. Yes, all of the fungal trees associated with this region are going to be housing items. I think they are through, I think most or all of them are through Lalia's Market. Mario Justum says, were there any particular new challenges in developing this region or one of the other three, or things tried for the first time? So a lot of the challenges, I would say, for building out this in all of these regions was more about us as a team reconfiguring a little bit how we work in order to help our content designers kind of like know and see what things were and where things were earlier in the process than we typically do. Being able to get them not like finished spaces, but spaces where, they could count on, I want to go this way, where they could count on seeing what the locations were, what the footprints of them were, and where they were situated in the world exactly. So when it came time for them to start writing their quest dialogues and whatnot, even if the camps aren't built, they know the, locations, they know kind of where they are in relation to all of the other locations. Because typically, in the past when we would build these things, we would have a general, like, okay, we want this kind of camp here, this kind of camp there. Oh, we got a sad rat. And because of that, where am I? I want to keep going this way. We were a little bit looser. We still knew that, hey, we need an orc camp, but we didn't know exactly where that was. And that made it tricky sometimes for the content designers when they're writing quest dialogue and whatnot to be able to provide directions for it. So I think that was the big, new change and challenge for us, was trying to have some of those higher details in sooner. As far as the challenges for actually physically building the space, at least with Adagím, I don't feel like I really hit any challenges. that were, distinct or different from building any other region. It's no problem. There's just some fungus growing all over. If you get hungry orcs, you can just pluck some up and roast it over your fire. You're good to go. The Forest Gospel, get bit by a fungal spider, turn into a Last of Us zombie. It is the concept of cordyceps, and what that does to the animals that it infects is that has been nightmare fuel for a very long time, even prior to the popularity of The Last of Us. I remember watching some videos of ants, because we looked at cordyceps stuff back when we first started doing Moria, with the fungal spiders there, and the fungal everything there, the spiders, the orcs and whatnot. So cordyceps was a pretty significant inspiration for those creatures as well. So going full cordyceps here for the spiders at least was fun. Take a drink. All right. Green Tea asks, why are some textures stretchy or blurry? Aren't those new assets? This is all work in development space. So if you see those kinds of textures, particularly if there are ones that, as we get closer and closer to launch, that playing through borers that get missed, please make note of them in your feedback and whatnot as well once borers are live. And those are things that we can look at and hope to address. And here's another scary dude. Good old Cordyceps Jones. Epic Games says this brings up an interesting idea about changing grass areas along with the walls to meet the theme. Unfortunately, we do not have the ability to make those kinds of changes to housing areas because all of that information is baked statically into the world. It is not dynamic. It's not something that we can change or edit on the fly. So I would not set hopes on being able to modify your homes in this way. Poteen says, although this is unsettling area, it is beautifully done. Thank you. The artists that were working on this were very excited to get to play around with visual language and textures like this, because we don't often go into something like this as fully as we are for Adagím. All right, where am I? Let's see. Epic Games says, I need that Boglurker skin for my lore master. Who knows? That may be something coming down the line. All right. So you can see up in the distance there, we are approaching Sul Madash, which is the capital, both the capital hub of the region and the capital hub of the Quinta, their last stronghold. Apologies. Seasonal allergies are getting to me. This is a fun time of year. All right. Now entering TBD. Like I said, this is in development region. So as we're running around in these streams over the next several weeks, fully expect to see a few TBDs here and there, a few things that are not finished, a few things that still are waiting on assets. That's the joy of giving a preview stream like this, where there are things that are not done yet. but they will be prior to the launch of the game. All right, so here we go up into, and I think I'm actually going to have to turn this off. There we go. And into Sul Madash. This is kind of the last bastion of the Quinta, their major city. This is their Caris Gelibrin, basically. It is, you know, when you think about like desert and wastelands and whatnot, there's always this idea, this concept of an oasis, and the Quinta hubs throughout the region, particularly so with Sul Madash, is all about this being an oasis. This is kind of your reprieve from the wasteland horrors that are all surrounding you, the fungal horrors. Somehow they are managing to keep it out as best they can. You know, there might be, as we get kind of, there are some more like wild and unstructured areas of Sul Madash where there might be little bits and pieces of fungus leaking in. But by and large, this is your safe haven. This is where you can feel comfortable and safe and free from all of the fungal awfulness that is in the valley below. I think I need to do some day file polish because as I walked over here, things changed back. There is a day file change that happens when you walk into Sul Madash so that you feel like the oppressive fog has backed up a little bit. It's not as close to or as encroaching around you, but you still see it in the distance. I'm going to see if I can get us to a good vantage point out over the swamp. One of these flets here will do that. So you can see we came in basically directly ahead of us from where we entered. And we made our way through the hills and across the swamp, and now we are here standing up above it all. Alrighty, well let's head back into Sul Madash and look and see what else is in here. Like I said when we were in Livarth, there are not often times where the Quinta have built permanent structures. But here in Sul Madash, in Livarth, and in the couple of other hubs that are in this region, this is where they, you know, kind of set their anchor. This is where, you know, they decide this is home. We can come back to this. We can feel safe in this. So yeah, I need to tweak the date files there a little bit because it feels like I was hitting some stuff. Raviolin Loisto says, does going through the fungal swamp affect us negatively? Not currently. We don't have anything like that. Those sorts of things they're fun ideas in concept, but often in practice end up being more frustrating than not. You know, if you were, you know, in the swamp and were constantly being hit by debuffs and damage over time effects and whatnot, like that would be more annoying than fun. And you know, we've dabbled in that a little bit here and there to try to help the environment feel more like it's an antagonist. And more often than not, it just comes across as, you know, not a very great experience for the players. And so I don't think we're going to have a negative effect applied when you're in the swamp. We might change our mind on that. We've still got some time before launch, but for the time being, our plan is to not make that sort of thing happen. Luclier says, how do you start building the area? More like we need one forest area, one canyon, etc. Or the epic story tells you that you go to the forest so you can build the forest area. So our build process always starts out with our high level region planning, where Chris, our lead world designer, he will sit down and he will basically produce what's called story time, where we know, where our, main story kind of wants to take us. In this case, 2, 3 years ago, we were like, okay, 3 years ago, I guess at this point, we were like, okay, we're going to Umbar and then Harad. What story are we telling through here? What general areas do we want to go through? And then Chris will take that, and for each update expansion pack, we'll write a pretty substantial backstory for what's going on here, the kingdoms that were here, the stories, how it ties into anything that is not canon, how it ties into the canon of Lord of the Rings. And then from there, he goes on to do further research about because a lot of Middle Earth is analogous with the world at large. So certain geographic areas are intended to and meant to be, similar to certain real world geographic areas. And so we do some research there, see what the geography, topography, cultures, topology, not topography, topology, cultures, what sorts of things, let me quote myself again, what sorts of things like that would exist in here. And then we work out how we can theme each region so that it kind of fits that geographic concept, but is distinct from the other regions that we're building, and also distinct from other areas that we've built in the game. How do we give it its own character, its own life? Once he's done with that, we do some high-level mapping. How does what new stuff we're working kind of connect to the rest of the world? And then it gets handed off to me, and I start doing the high-level actual height map work, where I use our tools and I use a tool called World Machine to start building out terrains that kind of match with what we want the regions to look like. And then after that, it's implementation, iteration, building it out. Let's see, we'll go through a couple more questions, and then we'll continue on with our run through. Riri Freak asks, how would you rank the new regions from most settled, civilized to least? So each region has 3 to 4 hubs associated with it. I would say that the most wild regions or wild appearing regions are likely to be Adagím and Anshru. Idagal was once a kind of destination for the peoples of the region, but now is no longer. But it has a major city, or a formerly major city, that is now an enemy stronghold situated in it. And that leaves Qijan as kind of the, I don't know if most normal, most lived in, most populous of all the regions. Potino Bowen says, so the kingdoms of Harad are older kingdoms in ruins and such. So if you've played through the content from Corsairs of Umbar, through Legacy of Morgoth, through the updates that we had earlier this year, you'll get a little bit more backstory. But this whole territory, Shigana, is a region that has seen many conflicts over its years, not even just related to the War of the Ring, but within itself. Small city-state kingdoms popping up here and there, waging war against each other to control territory. You have Numenorians coming in and trying to establish a foothold and kind of being fought back against that. You have factions of Morgothian followers. You have factions of just the general peoples that live in the region. So there, over the many centuries, there have been many small and large kingdoms that have formed and fallen in Shagana. And the story that we're telling now is kind of the rise of the newest of them, the bringing together of many peoples under Mizadi. And really a lot of the region content, less so here in Adagím, but in the other regions, is very, very heavily associated with Mizadi and her goals. That is not the through line for most of the epic story. The epic story, the Song of Waves and Winds, has its own through line that we're going to be following through as well. So you have like the region stories, and then you have that broader story. So right now, I am standing in front of the entrance to the raid here in Adagím. The raid. So each region. I think Alan and I talked a little bit about this in last week's stream. Each region will have its own instances associated with it. There's one major kind of end cap instance per region. The raid is the end cap instance for Adagím, even if narratively it doesn't follow the progression of the regions. If we were following the progressions of the regions, you might expect the raid is in Idagal, which is the final region. In this case, the idea, the concept for what the content designers wanted out of the raid was best suited for here in Adagím. But Kijan, Anshru, and Idagal each have their own kind of, end cap instance, similar to like what we've done in the past in some of the original regions of the game with, the Barrow Downs and the Blood Swamp and Fornost and Angmar and whatnot. They have an instance at the end of them that is kind of like a culmination of the region itself. Raviolin Loista says, what were the IRL inspirations for Adagím? I think a lot of it was, we started out with the idea of what do flooded forests look like? There are times where you will just see these barren, dying, skeletal forests because, beavers have moved in, or human progression has caused, flooding to occur, and then the forests just die. So there's no specific location, but there were certainly plenty of places that we had seen photos of these rakish or brackish dying swamps. So that's where we started. We hadn't quite hit on the fungal theming at that point. We just knew, we wanted the flooded forest. Then we moved on to the idea of, okay, well, what other things could come out of the forest flooding? And the idea of some sort of blight underneath the soil having been activated when the forest was flooded. And over the course of the stories within the region and the larger Song of Waves of Wind story, you'll learn more about why the region was flooded, what happened to cause it to be flooded. So the idea of this kind of fungal infection awakening within the within the swamp was kind of our starting point. It was, where we were like, okay, we like this idea. This is a good, start for things. And then that led us to just looking up the grossest funguses and molds and slimes that we could find, and gathering as much source material from all of that as we could, and then just letting our artist who was doing the work for this just let her imagination go and run wild on it. And so we have I think we have 4 different families of fungus throughout the region. We tried to make sure that the landscape, the trees, the frills we use, the creatures that we have in here, all kind of relate to that. Let's see. Mr. Alex says, will Kingdoms of Harad be the last regions based in Harad for the near future? I think while the Song of Waves of Wind will be ending with the expansion pack, I think we still have some plans for the Harad and Umbar regions before we fully depart from them. There are going to be some bits and pieces from the end of the stories in these regions, from the end of the epic in this region, that I think we'll want to resolve before we fully move on. So we're not entirely done here yet. I would not expect us to be lingering here much longer, but we are not completely done. Here we are at the Pukelman statues. These are going to be replaced with their own artwork at some point as well. We just haven't had the art completed yet. But we wanted to make sure that we had them placed, so that as content is working on these spaces, they know, where to go, they know kind of what to place around things, so that we don't have to do a lot of rearrangement when the final artwork does come in. I have to say too, I love the logo treatment for this expansion pack. I have a really hard time in my head not calling our expansion pack Kingdom Hearts whenever I go to say it. I've caught myself and stopped myself a few times already in this stream. So I'm just getting this out here. If you hear me say Kingdom Hearts, know that I am referring to the name of the expansion pack. Lev Scotland says, are you guys further away from the book's main events in time and distance? What is the best method, or what are the best methods to keep up the LOTRO feel? So we are certainly off in territories that are not heavily detailed in the books. And because they're not heavily detailed in the books, that does give us a little bit more flexibility to tell our own stories, and gives us a little bit of wiggle room to kind of fill in the narrative gaps of okay, we know that eventually Aragorn will campaign down here with Gondor to defeat the Haradrim, the Ordokai. We know that from the appendices. And this is our kind of opportunity to set the stage for that, to build relationships with characters here in the South that he can then, in the future, potentially leverage and rely on. And let's go this way real quick. When it comes to, tying up the loose ends from the War of the Ring that he has, or that he feels he needs to tie up. Looklier says, is the fungus a natural threat or corruption from Orc Sauron? And is there a 0 point, or is it all the same, or is it the same in all Adagím? That is a question to be answered by the content of the region. Hello, Hyena. This is one of my favorite new appearances for the expansion pack, is our hyenas. We have hyenas. They look great. And away he goes. Bye, hyena. Druid's Fire says, not gonna lie, this zone does kind of remind me of some planets I've landed on in No Man's Sky. It reminds me of every single planet I start on in No Man's Sky. I feel like they always drop me in the worst, scariest places for a brand new character to start in that game. All right. So now we've gone through the swamps. We're starting to proceed south. I don't know why you're floating, dude, but you do you. So now we're starting to proceed to the south and heading through the kind of borderlands of the forest into the region of Kijan. In these kind of borderlands here, the fungal blight is not very present at all. It has not worked its way up into these upper hills. There might be a couple patches here and there like there were in the eastern hills, but by and large, this portion of the forest is what Adagím looked like before the fungal blight took it over. All right. Manadler says, is there anything you can say about how the environment of the new regions affects the cultures to be found there? Well, at least in Adagím, I would say the environment is instilling an incredible amount of anxiety amongst the Kinta. I think that the character of, oppression and corruption exists through most of the region, whether it is the presence of the blight or the presence of the orcs. I feel like the Kinta in particular are very anxious about their situation. Here we are at the Jackal Den with all sorts of dead stuff here that they have brought back. Lots of jackals everywhere. What is the most fun in this region from the world design perspective? I kind of like playing around with water a little bit. And the fun thing, it can be a bit of a headache to do all of the scuzz layer painting on the water because it's not as refined a process as painting our terrain textures are. But it is kind of nice to just kind of just sit back and relax and just mindlessly paint. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed most about working in that area was I could just kind of sit back and relax and have low pressure paint time. Another fun thing when it comes, just to point this out, so we're on the border now between Kijan. You can see in the distance there the mountain lines and whatnot for Kijan. There are lots of flowers here. There are not supposed to be lots of flowers here, and we don't know why there are lots of flowers here because the files are not supposed to have lots of flowers showing up in them. So this is the fun with game development, where we're going to have to figure out why this is just all flowers. There's probably one file somewhere that was set up wrong in the whole thing, and it caused something to just blow up. And now we get flowers. All right, go down through. Let me find a good vantage point to kind of park, looking out. So I think there's a little bit of high ground over this way that I can park at, and we can look over some more of the forest, or we can just gaze through the forest here. This might be a good option. This is good. This works. And let's see what we have left for questions. We only got a few minutes left in the stream, so I'm going to try to get through what questions you all have. Let's see. Critter says, I think people miss Eriador around Arid Luin to the right of Mirkwood. We want more book feel. South looks and plays cool, but it feels out of place and filler-like. Well, I think that's one of the challenges that we have is, what people think of when it comes to book feel is all territory that we've covered, right? We've done Eriador, we've done Ravanian, we've done Gondor, we've done Mordor. We've dropped the ring, we've had the Great Wedding. And most of the rest of the books, at least following the timeline of the books, keeps us in those areas that we've already been to. And having already been to them, the opportunities for new stories, interesting stories, and locations that feel fresh and new is much less because you've already been there. One of the risks that we took with building out King's Gondor was basically revisiting a place that players have already been. And granted, it was its all new region, with new POIs, new landscape added into it, and previous POI is getting a facelift to show that time has changed. And it had its pros and cons. With the quest pack that we released earlier this year, the risk there was it wasn't a new landmass. We were trying out to see, can we introduce new things into old landscapes and see if those are compelling and interesting. And we get a lot of people saying, like, they like playing our content, but they wish there was more new landscape. And it's really hard for us to deliver on new landscapes if we stay in the places that we have been following the stories that are told only in the books, and only in the main books, not in the appendices. So it is hard to grow the game if we stay in areas where there's no more room for growth. I hope that gives you at least some of our perspective on why we're going to places like Harad. And we're going to run into this issue too when we eventually get to places like Khand and Rune, where like the cultures, the structures, like how those areas are represented are not going to be what's familiar, because they are locations that are not heavily detailed. And because they're not heavily detailed, it's gonna not feel as familiar, and it's not gonna feel as cozy, and that can be difficult for some people. We understand that. Riri Freak says, I only realize how far landscapes in LOTRO have come when I see new ones. The old ones profit a lot from nostalgia. Huge respect for all the consistent but inspired work you have all done over the years. Thank you. We're definitely... It is one of our challenges ahead, particularly for the world team, is to create new landscapes, new regions that feel modern within the trappings of our engine and the tools and the setting that we have. And we're always trying to find little ways to experiment a little bit with assets, experiment with our landscape design to try to help it all feel more modern than we kind of really have any right to be, considering the age of the game. And I think we're learning new things all the time. We're trying new things. That is one of my core intentions working in world design, is particularly on this, is to find what I can where I can to stretch stretch what we're working on. Mod 2N says, how do you feel about the possibility of presenting the same territory in different historical periods? Do you find it interesting or more mundane than creating a completely new location? What do you usually focus on in terms of world design when you come to represent the same territory in a different time periods? I think the biggest thing with that is representing change. We need to make sure that the change that we are representing in those spaces feels substantial enough to warrant us revisiting it, right? I think, going back to King's Gondor, the idea of reconstruction and the idea of introducing more playable landscape in there were the two big changes that we wanted to make to King's Condor to make it feel like it could stand on its own as something that was distinct. As the Newell Bazaar, very stark difference in representation, a whole different, season, basically. You have Mordor Besieged, which was intended to represent the Mordor in the First Age while a major war was happening. I don't think we did a great job in selling the conflict in that landscape, and that's why we have things like Elder Slade and Elder Slade at War, where we very specifically made substantial changes to the landscape, even though the period of time between Elder Slade and Elder Slade at War was not as significant as some of these other things that we've done. We wanted to make sure that the change was significant and impactful, and I think that's the important thing when we come back to these areas, to do like post War of the Ring versions of them. I think Rohan's going to be challenging because of that, because Rohan did not suffer the devastation that Gondor did, and because it didn't suffer that devastation, the opportunities for change in the landscape are much more difficult. Let's see. I'm going to take a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Lev Scotland said, is there desert in the other Harad regions? So this is the least arid, or this is the least arid region of all of what we're introducing. We have, and to give you a map overview of where we'll be going over the next few days, we have Kijan here, which is kind of arid, almost farmlandy. You have Anshru, which are highlands that are kind of wasteland, blasted, salt flats, crystal flats, and then you have Idagal, which was once a more verdant region with a massive lake in it that has since drained out, and is really kind of a dying region now thanks to the presence of the Ordakai. So there is a lot. There's a lot more arity, not specifically desert. As I had said before, if you look here on this map, you have Gul Sakasha, which is the trackless sands south of here. That's really, once you're on the other side of the Ridge of Plenty, that's where the trackless Sahara-style deserts would be present. Because we're kind of, let's see, that's here, so that's Shoneth. So this is where we're at now. And really, once you're down here, once you're kind of more over here in Far Harad, that's your desert land right there. All of this. We may get there eventually, but we haven't gotten there yet. All right. Can you show us the maps? Here are the maps. Again, these are in progress. Mr. Alex says, this is the first time I've heard so many aircrafts pass over my house. Yeah, I don't know what's going on today. There's a lot. There's a lot. I think there's also been a couple of helicopters. There might have been an accident on the highway. Curtis says, is it feasible to sell smaller expansion packs that add stories within older regions like Bingo Boffin but bigger campaign? I think we tried that earlier this year with the content pack that we released. We tried that a little bit here and there too with the Further Adventures packs. So it's about kind of experimenting, seeing what works, seeing what people are excited about, and seeing honestly what sells. What compels people to engage with the content. Is something like a Further Adventure enough to get people excited? Is the pack that we released earlier this year that kind of retreads over existing areas but with new content, is that compelling? It's something that we're always looking at when it comes to engagement, analytics, sales, etc. is is how those things do, and that helps inform like what we release. All right. Well, I think I've covered most of the questions that have been asked, because a bunch of them have been asked in various forms. So I think I'm going to wrap up the stream right now. I've got the sun starting to come in here, so the sooner I get this wrapped up, the less I'll be blinded by it as things come in. So thank you everyone for coming in, hanging out. Like I said, this is the first of several streams. You know, we started out with Adagím, and next week we are going to roll on into Casual. So why don't I park myself? Well, we'll go here so you can kind of get a view of where we're going to next, and hopefully we'll have the flowers fixed by then. I might look into that this week and see if I can fix that up. So yeah, thank you everyone. Again, next week at 2 here on twitch.tv/LOTRO stream is where we'll be continuing this. We'll be going through the region of Casual and exploring that. I think our plan too is next week we may be starting our bull roars for the expansion pack, with Adagím being the first region we unlock. Pay attention to message boards, social media, Discord announcements. I don't know exactly when that bull roar is going to be happening, but I know that it is going to be happening soon. So please take a look, keep an eye on for that, and looking forward to seeing you all next week. I hope you have a great weekend, and yeah, happy expansion pack previews. Have a good one, everyone.